everyone. I am Renee Murray from the Division of Dance in the Rueff School of Design, Art, and Performance in the College of Liberal Arts here at Purdue University. And on behalf of Convocations, I'm very excited to be speaking to Yaron Lifschitz, the Artistic Director of Circa. Yaron is a graduate of the University of New South Wales, University of Queensland, and National Institute of Dramatic Arts, where he was the youngest director ever accepted into the prestigious graduate director's course. Since graduating, Yaron has directed over 60 productions, including large-scale events, opera, theater, physical theater, and circus. He has won numerous awards, and his work has been seen in more than 40 countries and across 6 continents by over 1.5 million people. Circa is a contemporary circus company based in Australia. Purdue audiences may be familiar with the company from their 2018 Globe Playhouse performance of the production titled Humans. This next chapter of Circa's internationally acclaimed Humans is a tightly woven choreography of bodies, pulsing with music by composer Yaron Lifschitz and revealed in Paul Jackson's dramatic lighting. Created by circus visionary Yaron Lifschitz, Humans 2.0 is intimate, primal, and deeply engaged with the challenge of being human. Thank you, Yaron, for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me. There's only one of me. I just listened to that introduction and it sounded like there were several and they were all amazing people. So thank you for writing such superlative copy and reading it.
Absolutely. I am so excited to be having this conversation and to talk about the work that you're bringing here to Purdue in October. First off, could you share a little bit about what it means to be the artistic director of Circa?
Absolutely. An artistic director's job is essentially at the best a kind of an impossible juggling act where, like all juggling, it's only a matter of time until you drop some of the ball. So I obviously, we are an ensemble-based organization. We have around 30 artists who are full-time employees of the company, which means that we go through putting on lots of different shows. And unlike many companies, they learn a lot of different repertoire. They will tour 8-10 different productions roughly simultaneously. But they also go through births, deaths, marriages, divorces, every other kind of human thing that happens. And I work with people, probably the average tenure is somewhere between 8 and 10 years. So I have that experience where they give me the best physical years of their lives. And I try and reward them with creating some kind of meaning, purpose, art with them. At the same time, there's an organization that supports that. It's surprisingly small and lean behind the scenes. And so therefore we all run around in the wonderful Australian expression, like blue ass flies, trying to buzzing around, trying to, keep the leaks from hitting the carpet and the bills paid and the visas applied for and all the other things that take to getting a company around the world. At the core, though, is the art that we make. And Circa is defined, I suppose, by a very simple artistic vision, which is that circus is an art form. It's an art form that's capable of moving the world, moving the people in the world, of changing the very kind of nature of what is a theatrical experience, an acceptable kind of thing. And in a way, from my personal perspective, there are a number of really big drivers for that, but we'll probably get into that later. I think as an artistic director, the experiences of both kind of providing a vision and being the kind of the leader and sometimes the figurehead, but also of being the person who runs around and makes sure everything is as good as it can be and nothing is particularly heinous.
Nice. Yeah, that's multi-pronged.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is not so much a job description as a category in DSM-5's kind of psychological pathologies. It's some kind of multiple artistic personality disorder, being an artistic director, and you you do get to the end of a day and think, I've been everything from psychologist, coach, judge, HR department, occasionally artist, marketing, and that is part of its joy. And what I loved about directing theater and then becoming an artistic director was I knew it was my happy place because I had to bring everything that I had, and it still wasn't enough. And I after doing this for more than 30 years, I still have to do that every day. I can never go into a day and think I've got this, because I don't.
Yeah, that kind of pulls me into my next question, which is what motivates you to keep contributing to this work and to Circa?
Yeah, I think there are a number of really big drivers for me. One is that I think that theatre got hijacked by literature, and I have a degree in creative, master's in creative writing. I studied English literature, so I love literature. I just don't love plays, and I think that theatre got kind of eaten by plays and drama and themes and characters and stories, whereas theatre's basis is much more in ritual. It's in religion. It's in the ecstatic experience of being human and of how we share that experience together. And I just wasn't seeing that on my stages. So I think I want to bring that into the world, and I think circus is a great medium for it because it's virtuosic. It's full of jeopardy. It's full of the authentic thrill. I also work a bit in opera, and opera has a similar immediate visceral quality. Some of the time, sometimes it's just people yodeling at each other for hours in a language you don't speak. But it could be that. And circus, of course, can just be people bouncing around doing tricks to show off. But I was interested in the emotional valence of those things. I was interested in. It struck me that most of the thoughts that I had, and particularly emotions that I had, didn't have names. And I think that I wanted to create names, or at least holotypes. I'm going to betray my work in museums here, which are the original defining thing of a species is called a holotype. And you write to a thing and say, "Is my fish the same as that fish?" That's the holotype that defines the species. I wanted to create kind of holotypes for emotions that we all knew, but we probably don't have names. Finally, I think that the world, when you run a company, you have the chance to make a world in a way that doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's a little kind of bubble. It's not sealed from the outside world, but you can adjust its forces. It's the forces that hold it together, its gravitational pulls in different ways. And I think it's nice to kind of experiment with physics, but also to play with different ways of thinking about what the purpose of that is. And I kind of at some level think that the concept of in the Jewish mysticism, in the Lurianic Kabbalah of Tikkun Olam, the responsibility of each generation and everybody in each generation to repair the world, I think is a thing that we do, and we do it in lots of ways. We do it in how we interact with our families, with service staff, but also increasingly with our environment, with people of different origins and diversities, and how we encounter those. And at a time when there's great tectonic changes in civilization, I would be both kind of it would be remiss of me not to sometimes think that I'm sort of doing this obscure bourgeois thing in a corner of making shows, and at the same time to think that's exactly what we should be doing, because if you can't make this thing better and send this out as a force for creating a better world, for repairing the world, then you're not going to have any effect storming the barricades or trying to sandbag the rising seas.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That would motivate me to keep making work too.
I'm also very lucky. I mean, I think, as somebody who has more tenacity than talent, I think I'm have been lucky to have been given the opportunities that I have, and I'm pretty determined not to waste them.
Yeah, well, and that motivation to keep going is just the longevity of an artist, right? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And also many artists feel like they're imposters and have this, this kind of imposter syndrome. But as I like to note, It's not a syndrome if you actually are an imposter. It's just a kind of operating assumption that you go, well, actually, I'm just not very good at these things, so I better learn. And I love that about what I do. I mean, I direct opera, and I don't speak a foreign language, and I don't read a score, and I don't play a note of music. So I'm, quite clearly manifestly an imposter. And I love that. I'm as physical as a turnip. So for me to work in circus is to work in a very foreign medium. And I think that that's really interesting for how you make work.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. So I think there's 10 dancers in Human 2.0, and I haven't seen Circa live yet. I'm so excited for it, and but I've seen lots of clips online, and the physicality that these performers are bringing to the stage, it seems as though they are trained in multiple movement forms. Can you speak a little bit to the background of the performers?
Sure. So our acrobats are essentially all circus trained.
Okay.
Some have got a bit of dance. A lot of them have done various other bits of training courses. They do, as part of circus, there's always a bit of ballet, a bit of yoga, a bit of other kinds of disciplines. But effectively, circus by itself is the art of doing things that mortals can't do.
Hmm.
So it's a kind of, there are circus artists and there are muggles. Like, they're just kind of people, normal people like me can't stand on one hand. We can't throw our legs over our head while we're in the air and land on the ground and, not get taken straight to hospital. So those are kinds of the basic things. In that, essentially, then we do two counter movements. So one is to increase those skills and just keep training them. We sometimes work with outsiders, but we have a very strong internal culture of sharing and training and research and development. So that's a process of accumulation. The second process that happens simultaneously is a kind of deconstructive process where we start to fillet those things for ideas, for the kinds of raw ingredients of abstract artistic form. What is the line? What is the quality? How does this work if it has pressure associated with it? And those things together create things that look a lot like dance or a lot like other things, but they're not actually. They're just the kind of inside of circus. What happens if you do your, to use a really simple example, what happens if you do that acrobatic partner routine, but without a partner slowly? So it's, while it kind of may land up looking like dance, and then you can, retrograde it, invert it, do whatever you like to it, but it may look a lot like dance. It's not actually dance. And the difference in circus is it's real. And I'm not denigrating any other art form, but circus is this kind of absolute art form of the actual. And as soon as it gets too untethered from that, becomes too choreographic or too theatrical, it loses the that kind of the authenticity, and it goes into that sort of, like, if you work too long in circus, your threshold for pretending gets very low. And I kind of go back a bit to the Walter Benjamin, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, thinking about what this kind of the aura of the original is, and that in a way, if you get too far from like the trick, the skill, the kind of the bit where you take weight or balance or fly or whatever, hang on at some kind of extreme level, it kind of diminishes, like, multiple reproductions of something, until the point where it is dance or theater or something else, but it's no longer circus. My job is to make sure that there's enough of that circus, that authentic presence inside your body with physical jeopardy and extreme effort, to create the genuine kind of work. And that's partly because sometimes to do that, you don't have a lot of time to learn how to act. You don't have a lot of time to think about your performance when someone's flying at your head. So you've got to have to be pretty switched on and pretty specific about where you want to allocate your focus, your attention, your training, your theatricality. So you would be right in thinking that a circus show does not have the same level of plotting as a farce, or the same level of theatrical blocking refinement as a Broadway musical, and kind of nor should it have, as long as it has something else, which is this presence of actual bodies doing impossibly difficult things in authentic and surprising and innovative ways, which is what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. For your process, do you hold like company class or training before you go into the rehearsal process, or do those things fold into each other?
So we don't have company class. We're not dance circus. Essentially, every day begins with an hour of warm up, which is mostly solo, and it features a lot of sort of prehab stuff, a lot of therabands, a lot of kind of very specific body wall. The extraordinary artists you'll see on stage wake up like 80-year-olds and kind of creak out of bed and then sort of like get themselves back to some kind of physical extraordinariness over a couple of hours. Then we usually do some skills together, and they do some skills, and then we do things from the show, and then we put the show on. In rehearsal, we do a lot of improvisation with acrobatics, and that gives us the kind of hyper awareness. But also, circus is never exactly fixed. People get injured. There are skills that don't work. So you have to be able to be very adaptable, even in a show. So the basis of what we do is improvisational. Structured, but it's nevertheless improvisational.
I would love to watch those
Well,
improvisations.
you may see one at Purdue. We had it. I was there with my wife and son a few years ago in 2018, and we had a brilliant time. So
Nice.
you never, yeah, they can be enjoyable. They can also be, like all improvisations, kind of turgid and self-indulgent. But
Yeah,
that's the bandwidth.
absolutely. Nice. So Humans 2.0 has 10 performers and it premiered in 2021. And so are the performers we're going to see here in October all the original cast, or have some new people flown in, to the process?
Yeah, no, you'll see probably only three of the originals, I think. I mean, that's partly because we just change over artists. We have a number of companies, so some of those, probably 2/3 of those artists are still with us, but are on other projects. But also 2021 January was a pretty curious time in our civilization's history, and we opened the show in Sydney, and I was in Brisbane. And me and the lighting designer were in my living room plotting via screen. The refrain was, "It's red, but it doesn't look like red. No, trust us, it's red." Yes, but it doesn't, it doesn't look like red. That was pretty much our experience. It turns out it is red. There's quite a large scene that's red, but it looked much more orange on my computer monitor at home. So it was a strange time. So there were a number of reasons why people weren't there, but also our shows are built to be organic. They're not designed to be single artist led things. They really do come from a shared kind of language and set of operators that create the show. They're quite algorithmic. Like when you make dance work that's task-based, you create a task to produce material. When you create language-based work, like not all the work, but some, and a big part of a show like Humans, you're creating work where the task is performed live, and the result of the task is not as kind of interesting as the actual grappling with and the performing of the task. It's the thumb marks in the sculpture where you see the kind of the effort, because I think our relationship between presence and effort are incredibly important to circus. If you remove effort, it becomes dance. One of our things that we often say is, don't dance the pathway. You have to rediscover it. If it's no longer difficult or challenging enough, we have to revisit it. Not just the thing about this task was that it was difficult, not that it was you could do it. That was less interesting than.
Yeah. Nice. And so as you pull new company members in, how do you integrate them into that? Teaching them the tasks and emphasizing the process, or yeah.
Yeah, and look, it depends very much on the circumstances they come in. Some people come in and we just need a body and they pick it up as they go. We have a very strong internal culture of leadership and training, and we improvise when we have time. But also, I think fundamentally, we tend to work with people who are pretty good at reading the room, and I think a lot of it is osmotic. It's just you absorb the kind of nutrients from the room. Sometimes they have with them, dark toxins, and they have to be expunged over time. But most of the time, we work with, we always work with really good people, and most of the time they're in kinds of good places where those things happen and can kind of create a culture. And I think that creating this, you walk in a room, this is a circa room. I know what this feels like. And by the same token, in the leadership perspective, you walk into a room and think, oh, this is not what a circa room should feel like. Where is the disturbance in the floors? Let's find that. Because when a group is optimized and in full flight, the challenges are fairly small compared to the force of the group.
Yeah, nice. And what about if they've had a piece, a performance for a long time? How do you keep it fresh so that they don't go into habitual motions or yeah.
It's really, I don't think there's a single answer. I think you try and find what the issues are. It definitely happens. Sometimes it just needs a good note session or a walkthrough or a bit of improvising can help a lot. We don't generally stay with shows. We generally have enough shows that you're moving into different things, but also people get, it's like, I don't know, it's like life or your choice of breakfast cereal. You just get over them things at certain points, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think you have to decide that you want to, at that point, kind of fake it for a while and see if the passion rekindles, or move on. And that's a very healthy part of the process too. I think, you have to just find your own adventure.
Yeah, nice. And for you as the artistic director, when you go into a new creative process, what is the spark or the motivation?
Yeah, mostly it's fear. I feel like most of the time you're just wanting to. There's an opportunity. There's a bit of an idea. Maybe there's a client or a commissioning partner, and your kind of main driver is, how do I not mess this up? How do I create? And of course, at that point, you have no answers, because the experience of making work, and I really wish everyone had this experience. I'm sure you've had it. Is that when you're in somebody else's world, if you watch a show or you watch someone else's rehearsal, you have plenty of notes, you have plenty of observations, you know how to do it infinitely better. As soon as you walk into your own space, you go completely blank. You've never made work before. You're staring down the barrel of complete catastrophe, and that's exactly what it should be. Yeah, there needs to be a leap. There needs to be a moment of synaptic kind of connection where you leap from one thing to another, and there's just a bolt of electricity, and you don't create electricity in that way. Inspiration by being inspired. You don't create it by kind of running around telling everyone you're an artist. You create it by hard work and being open to the discovery. And we talk. I talk a lot about the two forces, the forces of abandon, of kind of giving yourself over to the things and just following them, and the other is ambush, of being able to be surprised by and snuck up upon by something that you have no idea what it is. And if you're you just need to work on yourself. The work on yourself is two things. One is to be able to put work in, and at the same time remain open and available to those forces of abandon and ambush.
Awesome. Yeah. For once you start a process and you start actually making movement or content, can you describe a process that you've done recently? Like, do you start with an idea of what that movement looks like? Do you start by an emotion and then the acrobats play with that?
No, it's very different. I mean, we've just made a show called Duck Pond, for instance, which is a sort of retelling of Swan Lake via The Ugly Duckling, and that's very structured. It has choreographic sequences. It has a lot of theatre in it. I open a show tonight, which is set at a cathedral. It's very abstract acrobatics, but it has a very different set of operators. If we look at Humans 2.0, I was really interested in this quality that we've been playing with from the first humans of what is the nature of, how do you humanize acrobatics? What reveals us as being humans in a kind of not very interesting way, but just a really kind of practical way. And it was based actually on an interview that I heard of someone talking about ballet, and essentially saying ballet started as a courtly form, not as a performative form. And the thing that was courtly about it was essentially you removed the connection to breath, to the ground, and to your genitalia, and essentially codified things in the top half of your body to basically say, we aren't peasants. We are not doing folk dancing, right? This is we are aristocrats. And when you look at contemporary dance, there's a lot of motion, a lot of work to put bodies back in. So if you look at Batsheva or Hofeschekter or Sharon Eyal, or, there's a whole variety of work that has this kind of grounded, energetic, ritualistic kind of quality to it that connects like outside and beyond, very different to the kind of balletic world. And I was interested in, it struck me that there was an analog for that with circus, that circus was kind of biomechanically very exact. Somebody started, somebody went on a line, everything was sort of devoid of humanness. The question was really simple. What happens if you move? What happens if you kind of get in touch with things that move like humans move? And if you kind of amplify your own movement. So we're under the illusion that we're still, but of course we're not still at all. And if you ask people just to kind of, your listeners at home or watchers can do this. If you close your eyes, you'll become aware that your body is moving in a particular way. Some people have a rock, some people have a sway, some people have a circle. And if you just kind of amplify that, it's very easy. You suddenly land up moving. Put somebody on your shoulders and say, can you keep that movement going? Can you share that movement so that it's your feet and their head that is the movement? Yeah. And from these, a whole lot of things get born. But that's the end of it. And Humans 1 was an interesting example, the first human show, where I suddenly, after a lot of research, went, oh, we better make a show. I kind of threw a bunch of scenes together, which is why, in a way, I created Humans 2, because I wanted to start with going, we better think about the show somewhere in the process rather than kind of put it together in the last week or two.
Yeah, and in that, once you start making and you have all of these chunks and sequences, how do you know when something's worth keeping? How are you like, oh, that's it, and I want to keep building that?
Oh, I wish there was an answer to that. There's a great poem by W.S. Merwin, one of your amazing poets, American amazing poets, who is quoting John Berryman, another poet, and he says, but how do you know? How do the Merwin character? He says, if you have to know, don't write. And I think it's very much that if you have to know if you have to know that it's going to work, then don't do it, because there's no way to know. And you just have to follow your heart, your instincts. You stay available to people kind of feedback, but at the same time, you need to know that you should be making work that's in front of and slightly to an angle of what anybody else can perceive. So it shouldn't feel too like everybody walks out and says, yeah, that's a great show. You probably haven't made the show you want to make. I'm also, I don't want to talk too much about poetry, but there's a line, Yeats famously said that out of our quarrel with others, we make rhetoric, but out of our quarrel with ourselves, poetry. And I think that there has to be something that you bring to it that feels like it's answering something you can't put into words in any other way. If you can say it, theatre in general, and circus in particular is a terrible way to tell a story. It's a terrible way to say something that you can say, sum up philosophically, or kind of summarize and here's a written synopsis of what this show is about. If you can do that, then there's no need to do that. It's much easier just to write words. You have to be pursuing kind of something ineffable and inexpressible in any other way. And to do that, if you know what that is, then it's visible. And the thing about the woods is that they're no longer kind of dark and Freudian if you throw light on and explain them. We all need our mystery, and we all need the unknowableness. And luckily, as people, we're mostly unknown even to ourselves, never mind other people. So it's not hard to find irreducible mysteries. It's just you've got to be comfortable with knowing that you won't know the answer, and everyone might hate it.
Nice. Yeah. And for your collaborators, like your sound and lighting collaborators, when did you bring them into the process? And how did that collaboration then shape and shift the work?
Well, this was Humans 2.0 was a super interesting process because we were around the world. It was in the middle of COVID. So Ori, I work with in Israel and Berlin. We weren't in the same room together. So he kept sending things through and I kept sending them back. And Paul, our lighting designer, was in Melbourne, so he was able to come up and we worked together. Like I said, we weren't in the room when it opened. Mm-hmm. And it was we worked over a period of time. The music was really important, but we'd worked with Ori before, so I kind of knew what we were getting. I had a sense of where it was going. I was totally delighted with the project. Paul was more a philosopher than a lighting designer, so he was kind of really interested in certain ideas and how to create pressure on stage, and he was very interested in the kind of Martin Buber-ness of my work, the kind of I-thou-ness of it, and how this kind of the bonds between things was more important than things themselves. So he was wanting to tease that out in how the lights work. Libby, the costume designer, is my partner, my wife, and so we happen to live together, which is very fortunate for me at least, and good for our collaboration. And then there's a certain rhythm. I work fast, even if I work over long. We had time to make Humans 2.0 because of COVID, but I still work fast. I tend to like to hit things with the energy and impact rather than kind of slow boil them, and that's just my choice and my tempo. And then I don't think there is a how. I think if you produce the perfect results on the first go, that's great, and if it takes you a million times, then that's great too.
Yeah. And so in Humans 2.0, we explore the physical limits of the human body, finding balance, adapting to change. What are the performers' relationships to each other during the work? And is it always purely physical? Are there ever any emotional or psychological connections or aspects to it?
I think it's so interesting because the two questions that you've asked in there are almost the opposite. They're almost the opposite of each other, and they're kind of, one clearly comes from a marketing sort of perspective, and probably our marketing team, which is it explores the physical limits of the physical limits of humanness, and the other is there something more than the physics?
Yeah.
And the truth is, we're never anything but embodied. Like we're all like, there is no outside place you can go to say, this is my sense of meaning or my presence without a body. Maybe in some AI world that I'm too old and old-fashioned to understand, but it strikes me that my work, and at least in my work, is based on the body and the physical sphere and limits that it inhabits as being the site of our meaning, our emotions, our spirituality, our connectivity to other people. And that body, we tend to perceive that body as being matter. Right? That's our kind of, we're because we're such a visual species, we imagine that body is matter. When we think about what we're actually made of, we are about the size of a mote of dust is our physical matter in our body. What we mostly are, far, far more than matter, is energy. And that energy is essentially, we are space connected by energy with a very tiny bit of matter, just to really mark the ends of the lattice of the molecules more than anything. It's pretty much just a little very faint trace of who we are. Yet we feel completely present, even though we are almost entirely empty space and energy. So we don't create, nothing can be created from a sense of whether this body can stand on its head or flip through the air once, 2 or 3 times, really doesn't matter, right? What matters is how they do that in the world, what they bring from themselves, how they shape their own energy and other people's energies, how they connect with each other, with music, with light, with ideas, with things, because essentially we're talking about matter, we're talking about energy, not matter. And shows are essentially energy congealed and focused over time. They're not, there's nothing, you don't leave. It's not like you get to the end and you get a box. We didn't build a box or a table. We created memories and impressions, and we did that. That's all electricity, right? That's all energy. That's not a physical thing. So I think it's not a material thing. So I think that's, for me, very much is where the shows live. They live in this world of the kind of the fraught, tense kind of beautiful connections between things and energies and people, not in the kind of the physicalness. I'm very particularly interested in what things look like. I mean, you need to sort of stop them being ugly or very wrong, or kind of everyone standing in the bad place. But I'm definitely, when you look at a piece of a piece of modern, like when you look at sort of American modern dance, for instance, as a kind of vocabulary, and you go, so I just saw Alvin Ailey the other night in Edinburgh, saw Paul Taylor a couple of years ago. And you look at the kind of the way in which the visual storytelling and language is very clear, it's very precise, very beautiful, very well done. But there's a sort of the visual form and the energetic form are very closely matched. I'm now playing the role of the person who turns, or the ingenue, or whatever it is, and then around there, with some degree of abstraction or storytelling, there's a very clear thing. Whereas for me, if you think about the experience of standing around with your roommates trying to cook dinner, it doesn't look like that at all, right? It looks like someone's got this, someone didn't buy this, someone's resenting that, someone burnt their finger, 2 people want to use the sink at the same time. That's what life's like. I want to bring that to stage. I then might want to clarify it and make it only a single line of what happens to that cup of water over the course of that, making that pasta sauce, or show you the full chaos. That's my authorial, directorial choice making. But the essence of it is not, I know what this is because I'm putting on a show about people making dinner, because that doesn't interest me. I think you got to make dinner, you should at least eat the meal.
Yeah, great. And so if we have students watching who are interested in going into the field of performing arts, do you have a bit of advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wish you well, and it is a tough, sometimes brutal, often not very fair existence. So if it is a calling, a vocation, then please, you have no choice. And if it is a career or a set of choices that you're making for any other reasons, because you feel you should or something, then go as far away from it as possible. I would recommend accountancy, or something that will guarantee you an income and the opportunity to rule the world, which you will never have in the performing arts. And I think it's important to understand that it's incredibly difficult. So, and there's no talent, tenacity, work ethics, all important, but no guarantee of anything. There's a lot of luck and just randomness in the system.
Yeah.
If you're going into it, I think put yourself in a position where you can learn, try and always push yourself harder. You're capable of much more than you think you are. You will be getting a lot of messages now, particularly in this sort of moment in our epoch, of look after yourself, honor yourself, worry about yourself. We are at the moment, and my before we go any further, I should say this is not to suggest you should ever put yourself in an unsafe situation or a situation where you are, in physical or emotional danger, and like those things must be. There are some absolute hard and fast rules. However, there is a new Ptolemaic-ness to our civilization that puts us and ourselves at the center. And that's not how the universe works. We are Copernican. The world doesn't revolve around us. You mean none of us are ever the most important thing anywhere, ever. Right? That's a good place to start. So we have to therefore the opportunity is to be responsive, engaged, connected, but also humble and aware of our own limitations. And that should inspire us to work harder and more authentically and more supportively of others, rather than in opposition to them, or with arrogance and hubris, which are not helpful in any way. So I think one of the things is that we discover our limits by discovering our limits. And you don't know them yet. If you're 20 and you're 25 or whatever, and you think you know your limits, you haven't got close. Ask anyone, if you haven't, who has a child, and say, how much sleep did you think you need? And then how much sleep did you actually get? But you still appear to be here. Yeah. And I'm talking as a father of two very young children, as well as a much older one. You can do it. Yeah. But you didn't know you could do it till you had to. So keep putting yourselves in positions where you have to. No, there's a pretty good physical analog. We develop muscle by progressive overload of our system, but short of injury. And that's pretty good for an artistic situation. If you're not reading a book that's too hard, if you're not seeing a show you don't understand, if you're not in a conversation that you feel you can't express yourself in, you're not doing the work. Yeah. And the work is the work. It doesn't end. It's not that you get to the point where you're like, now I know stuff. Maybe you do. I've never got there. But you find yourself in new situations. So you have to continually, progressively overload the system.
There were lots of pieces of advice in there. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's great. Yeah, that was beautiful. I have one last question for you before we wrap up today. And that is there anything that you would like your audience to know before watching Humans 2.0, or anything that you hope we take away from the experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. I generally don't have a clear kind of thematic thing. I don't want you, there's no message in here that you need to do except experience the work. I would like you to watch it with fresh eyes and an open heart and experience what you experience. That said, I think one of the things that our work can inspire is a kind of envy. You sit there and you look at people who are mostly fitter than you are. Definitely in my case, they have more abs and fewer chins. They can do kinds of extraordinary things, and you think, oh, geez, wouldn't that be great? What I would love an audience to think about is, it's not where you end up, it's where you end up in relationship to where you start that counts. It's a mark of kind of difference. That's the thing. Nobody started doing this work at this level, and you didn't start doing anything that you're going to do. And whether that's the regularity with which you clean the dog bowl, which in my case is fairly small, or how many abs you have or handstands you can do or whatever, doesn't matter. The thing that is connective, challenging, and maybe ultimately redemptive about us as a species is that gap, that period, of that zone of improvement, of mastery, of accomplishment, of addressing the things that we're not great at and simply getting better. And I want you to not admire, hopefully you love the show and you stand at the end and you whoop and cheer and donate lots of money to Purdue and to Circa. That'd be fabulous. On a much bigger level, I hope that you think, wow, well, if they can get there from people who were once crawling around as infants on the ground, maybe I can get somewhere, and maybe our species is a little more inspiring and a little more connected than I thought it was when I walked in.
Nice. That's beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and just this really lovely and engaging conversation.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Renee.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank our audience for being here and watching with us today. And we all look forward to the Circa performance. Humans 2.0 will be at Loeb Playhouse on October 28th at 8 p.m. Thank you all.
Fabulous. Thank
Bye.
you.